Well, hello everybody, what's up? Welcome to the Rapatopoulos Show. When it comes to parkour in Assassin's Creed, sometimes the fanbase can be just a tiny bit divided when it comes to which parkour system is superior. Most people who really dive deep to pull out everything these games have to offer will tell you that the classic system, meaning the system we see in the first 4 entries of the franchise, is the superior system. But there are a lot of people who would push back against that and say that Unity has the best parkour out of all the Assassin's Creed games. There's even a camp of people out there who think the Kenway Saga games are at the top of that list. But I think the one thing that most fans can agree on, regardless of why they may prefer one system over the others, is that the parkour system in the original 4 games has the edge over all the others when it comes to control, consistency, and individual player expression, and it uses its mechanics to give players a greater freedom of movement over any other system to follow. For enthusiasts of this classic system, it would reign supreme from 2007 until today, remaining mostly untouched, with slight variation from game to game between AC1 and Revelations, and a few minor tweaks offered by mods in the following years. It wasn't until this glorious year of 2024 that we would see any real advancement that would immensely enhance this already great system and bring a ton of secret buried features to the surface and give players access to them at the push of a button. This is the Definitive Parkour Mod, a mod that cemented the classic parkour system in its position as the greatest movement system in, probably all of gaming. I've been lucky enough to talk with everyone involved in the creation of this mod on an almost daily basis for the last several months. Although the mod is still being updated with new features somewhat regularly, by the time I came into contact with this fine group of distinguished gentlemen, the mod was basically finished. It makes me a bit sad that I was unable to help with the creation of this monster, so I figured I would use my experience using the mod, the knowledge I've gained from talking with these guys, and my wonderful articulate communication skills to give some history on the mod, talk about what the mod is, what the mod isn't, explain what makes it so great, and do my best to clear up any misconceptions about it and the intent behind its creation. If you're someone who occasionally consumes Assassin's Creed related content here on YouTube, you've almost certainly stumbled upon one or many of these modded parkour videos, most likely from one of the Ezio games. At a glance, to the untrained eye, you might think that this mod is intended to improve on the perceived clunkiness of the original games by adding new animations to increase smoothness, sort of bridging the gap between classic parkour and AC Unity style parkour, pushing the former in the direction of the latter and serving as a sort of classic parkour fixes mod. This couldn't be further from the truth. It's much more of a classic parkour enhancements mod. So today I'd like to tell you about how this mod takes these sometimes seemingly Unity-esque elements and gives the player full control of them in classic AC movement fashion. But first I want to talk about the talented folks involved in the creation of this mod, their intent behind it, and why it's important to all of us to maintain full manual control in movement while implementing these new features. I hope you'll excuse my lack of fluency on the topic of modding. You gotta remember, I'm a console boy at heart who has just barely dipped my toes into the world of PC gaming, specifically for these parkour mods, so be patient with me. Like many stories, the roots of this one could be traced quite far back in the past, especially since some of the people involved have a longer history in the AC modding world. But for the purposes of this video, we're only going to go back to February of this year, when a fellow who goes by the name of HenryPDT felt the very innocent urge to replay the old Ezio trilogy Assassin's Creed games. Spoiler warning, he hasn't replayed them still. He seems to have become just a little bit distracted, because before diving back into these classic games, he was curious to take a look at what mods were available for them to enhance his playthrough. Obviously, this was before modding in these games really popped off, so Henry was a bit unsatisfied with his findings. Still, he was able to find 2 mods that were in line with what he was looking for. The first was by a guy who goes by Petrichor, who you may know as Michael M here on YouTube, and through Petrichor, his animation swap ledge stop remove mod, he found a second mod, Random COG's Near Miss mod. He was thoroughly impressed by what these 2 mods were able to achieve, and that kinda got him curious about how this stuff works. He reached out to Random through a Discord server he had been invited to by Petrichor, and the 2 of them quickly became friends. Random had more or less retired from modding at this point in time, at least firsthand, but he agreed to show Henry the ropes of modding and Cheat Engine, and together the 2 of them got the ball rolling on what would eventually become the Definitive Parkour Mod as we know it today. So Henry and Random, with some additional modding assistance from Petrichor and the expertise of 2 more members of this Discord server I mentioned before, classic movement expert Animus Drifter and unhinged hookblade aficionado 777 as consultants to help guide the mod team in the right direction and give input on what they wanted to see from the mod, as well as helping them to map buttons and test things as they were developed. From the time Henry first became interested in modding to when he released his first edition of the Definitive Parkour Mod was only 10 days. In 10 short days, he was able to get a decent enough grasp on modding and was actually able to put together the first version and release it to the public, which is especially impressive considering Cheat Engine is notorious for being a painstaking and tedious process to mod with, taking several hours of trial and error, manually editing code, sometimes with little to no desired results found. Features of his first edition included parkour down close and far, manual vaulting, and forced freeform jumps. Sounds like a pretty good start to me, but that was just the beginning. Over the next few months, the team would continue to add features like beam swings, pole foot landings, horse flips, vault modifications, and a ton more, adding an insane amount of depth to the already deepest movement system in any AC game. And they were able to do this for not one, not two or three, but all 4 classic Assassin's Creed games. Since then, he's even moved on to adding most of the same features to the Kenway games, but I'm not here to talk about AC3 or Black Flag today. I want to keep focused on this original system and how this mod enhances it in every way, adding a long list of new features, digging up hidden moves to increase both opportunity and fluidity in a way that's respectful to and upholds the classic parkour gameplay experience that we all fell in love with. As enthusiasts of the things that make this classic system great, the team put a high priority on keeping the core of classic movement alive by maintaining a high level of manual control and freedom in the way you interact with your environment, while drastically increasing the amount of opportunities and options you have with almost every object in your path. While there are a number of passive features that lend themselves to improving overall quality of life, such as disabling those annoying, seemingly random stumbles and decreasing the amount of time you get stuck to a wall before you're able to eject, it's important to understand that the vast majority of the new features are fully manual and have to be executed with intent. They'll only happen when you tell the game to make them happen. That's the main thing that separates the way you interact with the architecture in these classic games to everything that came after, and that experience is only richer with the mod. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to use a clip from one of my choreographies to actually demonstrate some of the newfound control that we have here. And it actually starts before the move even begins here. So if you jump like just in vanilla, if you jump across this rooftop, he's just going to jump across to the next rooftop. But if you use the mod feature to jump to hang, he will target a handhold landing here on the wall. And from here, if we jump in vanilla, which we can replicate by just holding high profile and ejecting, he'll jump to this post here. Which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but with the mod, there's a ton of new options we can explore. For my choreography, I chose the fanciest, most flashiest thing, which is to dive beam to this pole and then execute a horse flip. With our new heightened sense of control, we can do a parkour down close to eject to this post here instead of the further away one. Using the same dive beam move we used before, we can target this post and do a nice little parkour down, or in the same vein, we can actually swing and use a directional swing to swing towards the wall, grab it, and then eject. Another option we have is to force a freeform jump here, which will cause him to not target anything until you eventually land on something or grab, like I did there, and grab onto the wall. And finally, we have fan favorite vaulting, which in this case is going to end in a freeform fall using one of the vault modifications that we have, and then eventually grab the wall and eject. And speaking of vaults, that's another great example of how we can kind of use this mod to enhance general movement, and this looks like a pretty good place to demonstrate it. So let's go take a closer look, shall we? So as we approach the top of this roof here, you'll see we've got a pretty standard setup of parkourable architecture here, stuff you see all over the city. And if we approach it just as you would in vanilla, you'll see the same thing you've seen a million times, just basic hopping across from one side to the other, nothing special going on. So if we start to use vaults to spice things up a little bit, you'll see here, if we vault over this sign, he will vault to hang on the other side, which if you're going to just eject to the next post, probably not, the most useful case for this, but if you were to vault for it and then perhaps eject to the side, that could be something. That could chain into something really cool. Since he likes to vault to hang on this sign, we can use vault modifiers to change that. If you use a vault landing far, we can just directly target this post and bypass that hanging state. Another example of modifying your vault would be to use a freeform vault, which will cause him to drop, and it's recommended that you pair this with a nice grab to save you from falling to your death. Check again, bitch. This is my city. Alright, so another example of vaulting, this time from the opposite side, we can trigger a vault from hang, which is if you're in a hanging state on a sign like that, you can vault over it and then, as with everything in this demonstration, chain it to whatever your heart desires. And I know we're talking about signs a lot in this video, but guess what? We can vault over posts as well, or pretty much any other object you encounter in the world. If you can jump over it, you can probably vault over it. One more example that I forgot to record for myself is vaulting over a post and into a swing. Look how cool this is. So thank you to Animus Drifter again for letting me steal these clips. That is so sick. So I think vaulting is just a really good example of how this mod can really open up a whole new world of options and opportunities just in your day-to-day traversal, and like just changes the way that you can interact with objects that we've been interacting with and jumping over for years and years and years. And it's cool to be able to, you know, interact with them in a new and exciting way. That's kind of why I love vaulting so much. It adds so much spice. You know what I mean? One more mod feature that I'm going to personally demonstrate here by request from the legendary Animus Drifter himself is the angled swinging. And I recorded this clip after way too many attempts to really put a highlight on the angled swinging and how cool it is. Let me play that again because it's pretty fast. So if you get to the top of this roof like I do here and you target a dive beam on this little awning to an angled swing, swing up, dive beam, swing all the way down. What a sweet little parkour down. Thank you, I know. Alright, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You've just survived the unscripted, you know, chaotic rant portion of the video, and I've never been so excited to get back to a script, so here we go. It's scripted speech time. And transition back into script. Okay, so these are just a few examples of how much depth and freedom this mod creates, and how it opens up a world of options in areas where you would normally only have one or two. These newly acquired options really begin to splinter off into wild territory when you consider that these are just a few very basic architectural setups, and you have just as many different options and decisions to make with every beam, pole, or ledge you touch. Continue to apply these features, along with dozens of others, to all your parkour interactions as you move through the city, and you'll really start to get your money's worth out of this thing, as the web of potential outcomes ripples forward into the great beyond, and that's when you'll really start to realize exactly why this is the most versatile movement system in all of Assassin's Creed. Does this sound intimidating, overwhelming? Well, guess what? It kind of is. It's a lot to take on, and I wouldn't recommend anyone pick up this mod if they don't already have a solid foundation on how to efficiently move around in these games. You will likely not have a very fun time. Miraculously, these guys were able to implement and map out all these new features in a very intuitive way. Hell, they even created a parkour mode button you can toggle on and off, which disables vanilla features like target lock on, tackling, weapon wheel, and attack to free these buttons up to stuff in even more movement capabilities. But even with cleverly mapped controls, it can still be a lot to undertake. I still struggle with remembering and inputting all the different things sometimes, especially when you're doing multiple different things in quick succession. This is likely part of the reason Ubisoft decided not to take parkour to these depths on their own back then. It's really not something you can just pick up and play. It takes a good amount of time and effort to understand and become fluent in. Why did they decide to go the opposite direction entirely? Well, that's a story for another time. I'm not going to go in depth on each and every feature this mod has to offer. I'm simply not qualified to do so. Even though I've been able to string together enough mod features to release a few pretty decent modded parkour sequence videos, I still have a lot to learn before I've mastered this thing. If you're interested in learning about each and every individual move, I would highly recommend watching Animus Drifter's mod guide video. He does a far better job than I ever could explaining each feature and how to use them. I still reference it pretty regularly if I can't get something to work the way I want it to. Okay, so now that I've kind of already covered the philosophy and intent behind why the mod is the way that it is, and the importance of manual control, I want to talk a bit about how some of these new features came to be and where the moves came from, because this was by far the most interesting thing to me when I first learned about the mod. One of the fairly common misconceptions about this mod is that it does things that couldn't be done back when the games initially released because of technical limitations or something of that nature, and that these new features were taken by the mod team from some outside source and then implanted into the games. The crazy thing is that that's not true at all. Almost everything that you see in these mods already existed inside the game all along. The vaults, the horse flip, beam swinging, kiosk dives, they were all there all along. Someone just needed to unlock them from deep within the games and bring them to the surface with a keybind. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so this gameplay was recorded on my PS5. That's why it looks different. This is the Ezio Collection remastered version. And since it's on PlayStation, we can be certain that this is vanilla, right? Okay, now watch closely when Ezio exits this well. Look familiar? A back eject from a well produces a vault. Again, please excuse the rough explanation, but somehow, with some mod magic, this move was unlocked from this very specific contextual action and mapped to the square or X button, and voila, we have vaulting that can be applied to literally thousands of objects found throughout these games. The vault from hang animation comes from exiting a well forwards. And where do you think the name horse flip comes from? It comes from, let me tell you, it comes from flipping off of these horses, you know what I mean? And the same goes for the kiosk dive. Kiosk dive, get it? Other features have a little bit of a more simple explanation. For example, allowing for foot landings on poles and other handholds, like the ones covering almost every single wall, was just a matter of allowing Ezio to target these objects with his feet instead of just his hands. Of course, as we mentioned before, it's up to the player to tell him when to use his feet. Swinging from beams is equally as simple to understand. Henry just told the game to let us swing from all hanging states instead of just from poles. So yeah, most of these new moves aren't really new at all. They existed within the game all along. It just took 17 years for someone like Henry to come along and bring them to the surface and hand them to us with a pretty little ribbon on top. I think the fact that this mod uses mostly assets from within the game itself to enhance it is really a special thing, and just goes to further show how amazing this movement system is and was all along. It just took a little bit of tweaking to blast the door wide open for a whole new world of opportunity. All of these features serve to deepen that classic experience and elevate it to a level that undoubtedly surpasses any parkour system Ubisoft has ever created. It's really incredible to experience movement in these games in an entirely new way after all these years, and probably thousands of hours spent playing them. Okay, so the final thing that I want to discuss in this video is a topic that can be a bit confusing or seem silly if you aren't caught up on all the details of its importance. I didn't fully understand it either until it was explained to me, so I'm going to try my best to explain it for you now. If you're an Assassin's Creed content creator, I suggest you stick around for this segment for your own safety. You do not want the parkour police to come a-knockin', especially 7. The magic word is grounding, and what this means is not using certain features in certain situations that would cause super unrealistic results. The prime example for this would be using a horse flip in a situation where Ezio definitely would not have enough momentum built up to launch himself into a flip through the air to land on an object higher than the beam or pole he initially swung from. This is probably the most abused feature that we see in choreographed parkour sequences. In the vanilla game, these flips were reserved for jumping off of horses, where the horse's speed would definitely generate enough momentum to send you flying, but since Henry was nice enough to unlock it for us to use at our discretion, it's up to us to govern ourselves, since there's not really an efficient way for the mod to limit in what situations we can and can't use them in. Other moves that are particularly susceptible to abuse are shown here on the screen, including swing up, super hop, especially super hop. Dear lord, this thing is dangerous. All of these volatile features are disabled within the mod upon download and have to be manually enabled by you, the mod user, if you think you're mature enough to use them responsibly. Grounding of these moves are especially important for AC content creators. I don't particularly care what you do in the comfort of your own home behind closed doors, but if you choose to share your gameplay with the world, the creators of the mod and I ask that you please keep your movements grounded for the sake of the overall image of classic parkour. The importance of protecting this image comes down to this. If someone who isn't particularly familiar with the AC parkour culture, let's say, stumbles upon a video of someone abusing horse flips or using super hop to target objects that would typically be unreachable, they'll get the wrong idea of what classic parkour is and why we love it in the first place. This can create a snowball effect of more and more people abusing the mod, sharing their gameplay, distorting the image of classic movement, and destroying vanilla optimizations that we love, like using wall run ejects to reach beams that you can't land on from a normal jump. The danger that abuse of these features could consume the image of classic parkour and turn the games into some superpowered freak show is something that the creators of the mod are very aware of, and it's important to all of us that we keep this stuff in check so that we don't end up destroying the very thing we love so much. We love classic AC parkour for its freedom of expression, manual control, and its physical believability. Obviously, the things these characters do in the games reaches a bit beyond what any actual human would be capable of, but there's still a level of realism as far as what they're able to do, at least in the world of video games. It's important to us that the mod features are not used to surpass the physical limitations of these characters set by the original games. So please, if you're an AC content creator, just use your best judgment when it comes to using the mod features, and if something looks out of place, like it surpasses the physical limits of what Ezio is able to do in the vanilla games, please don't post it. The damage this can cause is not only limited to the current image of the classic games, it could also potentially influence future AC titles if there were to be a drastic enough shift in the way classic parkour is used. We all know that parkour in AC is a shell of its former self. Let's try our best to not give Ubisoft any ideas or give them an excuse to add superpowers to movement in future installments of the franchise. I'm sure they're dying to do it. Alright, I'm really sorry about the lecture, but it's important, okay? So, with that out of the way, allow me to revisit my main talking point here. As far as I'm concerned, with the Definitive Parkour Mod, the classic Assassin's Creed parkour system is undoubtedly the superior system. It's not even up for debate anymore, it's over. If you prefer a different system for any reason, that's totally fine, and I respect your freedom to choose what you like the best, but deep down, come on, you know the truth. Well, shit, man, I'm in way over my head with all this stuff, man. I'm just a simple console man making a video about computer stuff that he has absolutely no business making. I hope I was able to do this topic justice. If you, the public, are seeing this video right now, that means it has been approved by HenryPDT and Animus Drifter, so I guess it can't be that bad, right? Please go show them, and also Petrichor or Michael M, some love. But I would, if I were you, I would suggest you stay away from 7. Actually, in the time that I've recorded this video, in the time that I've been working on it, he actually launched a new channel. It's called Avoid. So go check out Avoid, aka 777 even, aka Vault Machine, aka the Joker, the Clown Prince of Assassin's Creed. I'm just playing 7. You know I love you. I'll link everyone's channels below, as well as a link to Henry's mod page, Animus Drifter's mod guide, and perhaps something else I might be forgetting at this moment in time. Oh, and Random COG, if you're watching this right now, we love you, dude. Thanks for everything. Take care, everybody, and keep them moves grounded.